welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about secret project number 1, which is Tress of the Emerald Sea. I can't wait to talk about it with you. Let's jump in. First and foremost, I feel like I need to mention this because it's just the prettiest book I own, but the feel of this book was so nice to hold as I read it. I just absolutely was so happy. There's some books that when they're in your hands, they feel awkward and your reading experience, at least for me, can be really clouded by this. This was a joy to hold. The pages themselves feel really nice. The cover is a faux leather, which I appreciated, and it is just the most beautiful book. I loved this book. Reading it was such a fun experience, and let's jump into our discussion of Tress of the Emerald Sea, not Tress and the Emerald Sea. I thought it was Tress and the Emerald Sea until the book arrived, so that was my bad. As you might know, I have read a few books of Sanderson's Cosmere. I started reading Sanderson in December of 2022, and since then have read Mistborn Era 1, Mistborn Secret Histories, Warbreaker, Elantris, The Way of Kings, and now Tress of the Emerald Sea. And the last book that I had read of Brandon Sanderon prior to Tress was The Way of Kings. I did not love The Way of Kings, which I know is an unpopular opinion for many on BookTube. It is a very beloved book and a beloved series, The Stormlight Archive. It just didn't jive with me in a lot of the ways that I was hoping it was going to. So I was feeling in a bit of a slump in the Cosmere and Sanderson as a whole, which was really unfortunate because I felt like at that point I was just trending upwards and was on such a Cosmere high that this felt like a real bummer. So when I had ordered Tress, it was before I had read The Way of Kings. I am not a Kickstarter backer. I ended up just ordering the book itself, and I'm so happy I did. This book completely reinvigorated my love for the Cosmere, my love for Brandon Sanderson's writing. This book is special. I don't know how else to say that, but this book is a really special book, and it's one of those books that it's going to stick with me for a really long time, and I loved it so much. So let's talk about this book. Protagonist Tress, I feel like I want to keep holding up this book because it's so pretty and I just love holding it. Our protagonist Tress lives on this planet that's kind of a nothing planet, and she lives on this island that is made of rock, and it has been deemed by the king that people don't leave the rock unless they are a government official and they have this special permission in order to do so. Tress is definitely not a family that is from a family that is well-to-do. She is from a pretty lowly family. She is a window washer, and she loves to bake pies and is an inventive and creative cook and baker with what she can get that's on sale on the island. This book was inspired by The Princess Bride, which I read not long ago. I have a review up for it on my channel. I'll link it. And you can definitely see the parallels between these two stories and see how Sanderson was influenced by The Princess Bride. But instead of following the narrative of The Princess Bride in the sense of this is our female protagonist, these are the things that happen to her, and she doesn't have much agency in them. Tress goes the other way, and it's what happens when the protagonist has agency and decision over the things that happen to her and makes them happen. And it's a really beautiful telling of how people who underestimate themselves and undervalue themselves can change, and that change can be a really wonderful and beautiful thing. And it's just such a beautiful experience when you can see it through this lens. One of the fun things about this book is that this book is all from the voice of Hoid, and I love Hoid. I know that Hoid is not necessarily everyone's favorite Cosmere character and that they don't feel that they can necessarily trust him. I love Hoid. I think he is probably the most trustworthy character in the Cosmere because he's been everywhere and he knows what's going on. So having his POV was really fun, and the way that Sanderson wrote him was just actually quite comical and funny. It felt like all of the rules that Sanderson had maybe put on himself for other novels and novellas had been lifted for this one, and you can feel as you're reading it that he genuinely enjoyed writing this story. So we see our character Tress. She is in love with a boy named Charlie, but Charlie's family is from a wealthy family, and they say absolutely not, this cannot happen. They leave the rock, and Charlie, she finds out not long after, has been taken hostage by this sorceress, and Tress decides that she is going to embark on a journey to go save him. She is our quintessentially quiet, passive person who up until this point in her life has just let things happen to her. She never wants to interfere, step on any toes, or cross any boundaries, but she is willing to take that extra step because she loves Charlie. And she finds a way onto a ship, and she is out on her journey, and what a journey it is. One of the things that is really interesting about this book is that there are all these different moons and there are all these different seas, but the seas aren't made of water as we would expect them to be on Earth. There is a process called fluidization in which sand kind of bubbles up and creates motion and is able to move objects like ships. And fluidization is actually a real thing. You can look it up. It's actually quite fascinating. But in this story, the fluidization is fueled by spores. Spores can be quite deadly and dangerous, but they can also spark these really innovative ideas and imaginative ideas. And I really liked the way that Sanderson incorporated this into his story. You can tell that it was something that he researched and enjoyed writing, which again added further to the story and was just all in all so fun to read. The story itself has a few different characters that are really fun and enjoyable. It has a few characters that are not so enjoyable, such as the captain, but you really become enamored, at least I did, with Tress probably a third into the book. At the very beginning of the book, she's not as endearing as you would think, but as she begins to change, you really find yourself being drawn to her character, and there's so many relatable instances between her and pretty much anyone I would think of. Like, there are just everyday life things that you would think and go, oh yeah, that makes sense, I would do that. And she becomes a very likable character. I'd say she's probably one of the more likable characters in the Cosmere, and in terms of female characters that I have come across for Sanderson, other than Ciri in Warbreaker, I think she's probably my favorite, and that includes Vin. So I'll have to think about it, but I'm pretty sure Tress is like up there at the top. She's a really, really endearing character. I have an animal familiar in this book, and he is really likable. Hoyd really, for me though, stole the show. He is so funny. You come to learn very quickly that he's cursed, but he can't talk about his curse, and his curse is that he's been basically inflicted as being a dunce. So anytime someone tries to talk to him about something serious, he starts spewing on about something that's irrelevant and just nonsensical. And he is so lovable in this book that it just was perfection. I absolutely loved it. In terms of greater Cosmere implications, this was really fascinating, seeing as where we are in the timeline, because obviously if you're familiar with the Cosmere, you know that some planets, when we first encounter them, are a bit more primitive, such as Mistborn Era 1. Mistborn Era 2, we have kind of like, you know, steampunk age, and then we're supposed to get Mistborn Era 3 being in the 1980s, I believe, equivalent, and then Mistborn Era 4 is supposed to be the space age. So seeing where this lined up in terms of the technology that's discussed in this book was really fascinating. It was also really fun having read other Cosmere books, picking up on things that were in this book, and there ended up being more Cosmere stuff in here than I had initially anticipated, but you can read this as a standalone book without ever having read anything of Brandon Sanderson's before. A few things just might go over your head, but honestly, it doesn't matter because it's so good, and I want you to read this book so badly because it is such a good book. I actually want to read something from this book because I found, for me, it was probably the most profound thing that I've read by Sanderson, and it stuck with me in a way that I love it, and I am curious what other people think of it just because I think it's such a beautiful passage in the book, so let's jump into that. I love memories. They are our ballads, our personal foundation myths, but I must acknowledge that memory can be cruel if left unchallenged. Memory is often our only connection to who we used to be. Memories are fossils, the bones left by the dead versions of ourselves. More potently, our minds are a hungry audience, craving only the peaks and valleys of experience. The bland erodes, leaving behind the distinctive bits to be remembered again and again. Painful or passionate, surreal or sublime, we cherish those little rocks of peak experience, polishing them with the ever-smoothing touch of recycled proxy living. In so doing, like pagans praying to a sculpted mud figure, we make of our memories the gods which judge our current lives. I love this. Memory may not be the heart of what makes us human, but it is at least a vital organ. Nevertheless, we must take care not to let the bliss of the present fade when compared to supposedly better days. We're happy, sure, but were we more happy then? If we let it, memory can make shadows of the now, as nothing can match the buttress legends of our past. I think about this a great deal, for it is my job to sell legends, package them, commodify them for a small price. I'll let you share my memories, which I solemnly promise are real, or will be as long as you agree not to cut them too deeply. Do not let memory chase you. Take the advice of one who has dissected the beast, then rebuilt it with a more fearsome face, which I then used to charm a few extra coins out of an inebriated audience. Enjoy memories, yes, but don't be a slave to who you wish you once had been. Those memories aren't alive. You are. I thought this was the most beautiful passage about time, experience, life, and in the grand narrative of this book, it just exemplified everything for me, and it was so perfect, and I loved it so much. I might get that framed and mounted in my home because it's perfect, in my opinion. Let me know if you have read Tress of the Emerald Sea and what you thought about it, and if you've read other Cosmere books, where it ranks for you in the greater schema of all of the Cosmere books. I think for me is probably book number 2 following Warbreaker. You can let me know in the comments below, and if you would like to help support me, you can hit like and subscribe. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Fantasy Awash, and as always, I will see you next time. Bye.